Disney has always been at the forefront of animation, so of course they've drawn plenty of competition over the years. But here's the thing, some of their most fiercest competitors weren't outsiders looking in, they came from the inside of the company. Trusted animators, visionaries, even top executives who walked out the gates of Disney and later went head-to-head with the Mouse House itself. Like something out of a spy thriller, these defectors carried secrets, skills, and styles straight out of Disney and used them to build their own animation empires. Hey, this is Synergy Loves Company, where we explore how Disney connects to everything so you can feel connected to Disney even when you can't be at the parks. I'm Eric, and today we're uncovering the top 5 Disney defectors, animators, and executives who turned away from Disney and turned into the competition. And to kick off our countdown, let's rewind all the way to the late 1920s, before Snow White, before Mickey Mouse, even before Disney was a household name. Walt Disney had a breakout character in a promising young studio until a trusted partner pulled the rug out from under him. Disney defector number 5, Charles Mintz. In 1927, Walt Disney thought he was on the rise. His studio was animating Oswald the Lucky Rabbit for Universal Pictures, and the cartoons were being distributed by Charles Mintz, a man who Walt considered a partner. Years earlier, Mintz's wife Margaret Winkler had signed Walt for his Alice comedies, but when she got married to Charles, he took over her business. What Walt didn't know was that Mintz and his brother-in-law George Winkler were already planning a betrayal. Behind Walt's back, Mintz began holding secret meetings in Los Angeles with Walt's own animators. His plan? To cut Walt out of the deal and keep Oswald all for himself. He offered Disney's team better pay and security if they defected, and one by one, most of them jumped ship. By February 1928, Walt traveled to New York to negotiate a new contract. He thought he'd simply be haggling over a fee increase from $2,250 to $2,500 per cartoon. Instead, he walked straight into a trap. Mintz revealed that not only was Disney losing Oswald, but most of his staff already agreed to stay behind and keep producing the rabbit without him. It was a devastating blow. Walt returned to Los Angeles stripped of his studio's star character, most of his animators, and nearly all of his bargaining power. He swore he would never again make a character he didn't own. But in the ashes of that betrayal came a turning point, thanks to one man who refused to leave Walt's side, Ub Iwerks. Iwerks was Walt's right-hand man, an animator whose speed and skill were legendary. While others left for Mintz, Iwerks stayed loyal, sketching hundreds of new ideas. When Walt returned from New York with a rough doodle of a mouse he dreamed up on the train ride, Iwerks took that scrappy sketch and refined it into something magical. He rounded the shape, added charm and personality, and in the process gave life to Mickey Mouse. Working at a breakneck pace, sometimes 700 drawings a day, Ub Iwerks almost single-handedly animated Mickey's first cartoons, Plain Crazy, The Galloping Gaucho, and of course the game-changing Steamboat Willie. His artistry not only defined Mickey's look, but also saved the Disney studio from collapse. In the end, Mintz may have stolen Oswald, but with Iwerks at his side, Walt Disney created a character far more enduring. The betrayal set the stage for Mickey Mouse and everything that Disney would become. Of course, Walt didn't stay down too long thanks to Ub Iwerks, his most loyal animator. Walt just bounced back with Mickey Mouse and they saved the company. With a right-hand man like Ub, it seemed like Walt would never have to worry about defectors ever again. Oh wait, Disney defector number 4, Ub Iwerks. If Charles Mintz nearly broke Walt Disney, Ub Iwerks was that guy who put him back together. After Mintz walked away with Oswald, it was Ub who sat down, and at that pace that no one could match, he brought Mickey Mouse to life. He practically was Disney animation in those early days, drawing hundreds of frames a day and carrying the whole studio on his back. But even the most loyal friends can feel underappreciated. Ub began to resent how Walt got the credit while he did all the work. At a party, someone asked Walt to sketch Mickey Mouse, and instead Walt handed the pen to Ub and said, "Why don't you draw Mickey and I'll sign it?" And that was the breaking point. Ub stormed out, and by 1930 he had resigned, selling his 20% stake in the company for less than $3,000. Backed by Pat Powers, one of Walt's former distributors, Ub opened his own studio, the Iwerks Studio. For a few years, it churned out Flip the Frog, Willy the Whopper, and Comicolor cartoons. The work was clever, sometimes even groundbreaking, like Ub's experiments with stop motion and multiplane cameras. But the studio never really found that commercial success. The Iwerks Studio never reached the popularity of the Disney Studio. Ub had the animation chops by far. His cartoons were technically great, but lacked the vision and direction of a Walt Disney. You see, the synergy of Ub and Walt, that innovation and storytelling, that was the secret sauce for those early Mickey cartoons. By 1936, the money dried up and the Iwerks Studios shut its doors. After a few years of contract work, Ub returned to Disney in 1940, not as an animator, but as a technical wizard. And this is where he truly reshaped Hollywood. Ub invented optical printing techniques that let actors share the screen with animated characters, the technology that would pave the way for projects like Mary Poppins, and even inspired effects later used in Star Wars. He pioneered the Xerox process that made 101 Dalmatians possible. He even designed effects for Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, and eventually he helped build the Disney theme parks themselves, contributing to the innovation of Disney's iconic audio animatronics. Ub may have walked away from Disney once, but in the end, his return made him one of the most important innovators in both film and theme parks. He proved that being a defector doesn't mean being forgotten. Ub showed us that even if you walk away, sometimes you might find your way back. And you know what? I would love it if you would find your way back to Synergy Loves Company. So you can make your way back. Make sure that you like this video and subscribe so you don't miss any future Disney connections. With Ub's return, it might have felt like things were back on track, but Disney's troubles weren't over yet. The next defection didn't come from just one person. It came from a whole movement against Disney from the inside. Disney Defector number 3, UPA. The Disney strike of 1941 was one of the most dramatic moments in animation history. Tensions had been simmering for years. Animators were overworked, underpaid, and often left without credit for their work. And they definitely felt underappreciated as Disney poured money into fancy new studio facilities. Hundreds of artists lined up outside the brand new Disney studio in Burbank carrying clever picket signs with Disney characters on them. The strike lasted weeks, some accounts say months, and it all came down to broken promises, low pay, and Walt's refusal to recognize a union. Animators like Art Babbitt, the man behind Goofy, were fired outright for pushing back. Others were fed up with what Disney had become, a corporate machine that squeezed artists dry while pouring money into gleaming office buildings with private perks for executives. And while the strikers ultimately won and Disney was forced to recognize the Screen Cartoonists Guild, the studio never recovered its old sense of family. Friendships broke, loyalties fractured, and many of Walt's best artists walked away for good. But here's where it gets interesting. Out of that labor unrest came one of Disney's boldest challengers yet. United Productions of America, or UPA. Founded in 1943 by former Disney animators Stephen Bustow, Zach Schwartz, and David Hilberman, UPA started small, making wartime propaganda films just to keep the lights on, but financial constraints became their secret weapon. With fewer resources than Disney, they couldn't rely on lavish detail or armies of in-betweeners, so they leaned into something radical, a brand new style of animation. Gone were Disney's lush painted backgrounds and three-dimensional realism. UPA embraced flat shapes, bold colors, and a deliberately two-dimensional look, almost like moving modern art. Characters bent and stretched, not to mimic anatomy, but to express emotion. A raised eyebrow or a crooked shape could tell the whole story. In other words, where Disney was chasing perfection, UPA was chasing ideas. This cartoon modern style wasn't just cheaper, it was groundbreaking. Shorts like Gerald McBoing Boing and Rudy Toot Toot showed that animation didn't need to look like reality to feel real. Their simple modern style could also create iconic characters like Mr. Magoo. They proved cartoons could be abstract, intelligent, and even a little avant-garde. And the influence was enormous. By the 1950s, everyone was borrowing from UPA, even Disney, whose shorts like Toot, Whistle, Plunk, and Boom suddenly looked suspiciously modernist. And that weird angular Mickey from those Nash Rambler commercials had a definite UPA style too. But it wasn't just Disney. Studios all over the world took inspiration, and even decades later, the style had a full-blown revival. If you've ever watched Dexter's Laboratory, Samurai Jack, or the Powerpuff Girls, you've seen UPA's DNA. Gennady Tartakovsky said he still references their work every week. Craig McCracken said UPA hit him like a train. And Cal Arts students learned directly from UPA veterans like Jules Ingle, who passed the torch to an entire new generation, including future Pixar legends. And in true if you can't beat 'em, join 'em style, in 1997, Disney actually adapted UPA's Mr. Magoo into a live-action comedy featuring Leslie Nielsen. But that's a whole other topic for a different day. UPA's bold mid-century modern style didn't just change Disney, it went on to inspire everything from Looney Tunes to those Cartoon Network classics like Dexter's Laboratory and Samurai Jack. I want to know, what's your favorite cartoon that carries a UPA style look? Let me know down in the comments. UPA may have reshaped animation style, but Disney stayed on top of the industry, at least until the late 1970s. And that is when one of Disney's own brightest proteges decided that he could do Disney better than Disney, and he wasn't going alone. Disney Defector number 2, Don Bluth. When people think about rivals to Disney animation, one name almost always comes up, Don Bluth. And in the late 1970s, he wasn't just a rival. He was a Disney insider who staged what might be the most dramatic walkout in the studio's history. Bluth's Disney story begins the way so many do, with Snow White. He saw it as a kid and he knew right then he wanted to be an animator. By the time he was 18, he was working at Disney, apprenticing under the great John Lounsbury, one of Walt's original 9 old men. Bluth would go on to work on movies like Sleeping Beauty, Robin Hood, The Rescuers, and he even directed the animated sequences in Pete's Dragon and the Christmas short The Small One. But after Walt's death in 1966, things felt different at the studio. The spark was gone. Disney management leaned heavily into cost-cutting, reusing old animation, and making decisions by committee. Bluth later said he felt like Disney was just making the same picture over and over again, with artistry taking a backseat to efficiency. Frustrated, Bluth and two of his close collaborators, Gary Goldman and John Pomeroy, started secretly working nights in Don Bluth's garage on their own project, Banjo the Woodpile Cat. By 1979, they had had enough. On Don Bluth's birthday, September 17th, the three of them walked out of Disney, and over a dozen animators followed, including every single female animator at the studio. Overnight, Disney lost about 17% of its animation staff. Newspapers called it the Disney Exodus, and it delayed production of The Fox and the Hound, while it shook the company to its core. From there, Don Bluth Productions was born, and for a time it looked like they might beat Disney at their own game. Don Bluth Productions' first film, The Secret of NIMH in 1982, was a darker, more experimental take on animation. Rotoscoping, backlighting, dramatic tone. It didn't make huge money, but it proved that this scrappy breakaway studio could create films that rivaled Disney in artistry. And because of it, there came a partnership with none other than Steven Spielberg. With the help of Spielberg on 1986's An American Tail, Bluth's team told the story of Fievel the Mouse, a Jewish immigrant escaping persecution. It was a massive hit and it outgrossed Disney's The Great Mouse Detective. Spielberg and George Lucas then backed Bluth's next, The Land Before Time in 1988, which once again topped Disney's offering that year, Oliver and Company. For the moment, Don Bluth wasn't just the competition, he was winning. He was out-Disneying Disney itself. Real quick, out of Bluth's classics, The Secret of NIMH, An American Tail, Land Before Time, or maybe even All Dogs Go to Heaven, maybe even Rock-a-Doodle, which one is your favorite? Drop it in the comments below. I would love to see which one comes out on top. But as Disney often does, they fought back. In 1984, Michael Eisner and Frank Wells took charge of the company, and Jeffrey Katzenberg began reshaping the animation division. They made a bold promise: one animated feature a year, and in 1989, when Bluth released All Dogs Go to Heaven, Disney countered with The Little Mermaid. And the result? Ariel swam away with the box office, leaving Charlie the dog in her wake. From there, the tide turned and Disney launched into the renaissance of the 1990s. Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, The Lion King. Meanwhile, Bluth struggled with flops like Rock-a-Doodle and Thumbelina. His studio eventually collapsed and Disney's animation soared. Still, Don Bluth's influence can't be denied. He pushed boundaries, told darker stories, and maybe most importantly, gave Disney the kick it needed to innovate again. Without him, it's hard to imagine the Disney Renaissance of the 90s happening quite the way that it did. And speaking of that time, much of Disney's animation was fueled by Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was driving the animation department like never before. But Katzenberg's story takes some interesting turns, and we'll get there pretty soon. Whew, that was a lot of animation drama, right? Let me hit pause for just a second, because you might have noticed that I am rocking my Synergy Loves Company Castle shirt today. And if you want to support the show, you can grab one for yourself or check out the other merch that I have available at shop.synergylovescompany.com. You can even drop a donation there if that's more your style. Help me support the show. Now let's get back to the story. We've seen artists walk out, rivals rise up, and even whole new studios form, but our final Disney defector isn't an animator at all. Our final defector would shake the company from the very top. Disney defector number 1, Jeffrey Katzenberg. If Don Bluth was the first great creative to break away from Disney, Jeffrey Katzenberg was the executive who turned defection into an industry-shaking power move. Bluth left to chase artistic freedom, but Katzenberg left to prove that he could beat Disney at its own game. Not with a pencil, but with an animation empire. Katzenberg arrived at Disney in 1984, handpicked by Michael Eisner to breathe life into a struggling studio. And it worked. Under Katzenberg's leadership, Disney unleashed a run of hits that became the backbone of the so-called Disney decade. The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and of course that juggernaut, The Lion King. Katzenberg helped Disney climb out of stagnation and bury rivals like Don Bluth at the box office. But success brought friction. Katzenberg demanded speed and perfection from animators. Bigger, better, faster, cheaper, that was his mantra. He would often take a majority of credit for the successes of the animation studio, and that earned him some enemies inside the company, and some tensions with Eisner. When Michael Eisner blocked him from rising to company president after Frank Wells' sudden death, their relationship exploded. By 1994, Katzenberg stormed out of Disney, later suing the company and walking away with a reported $250 million settlement. And then came his next DreamWorks. Teaming with Steven Spielberg and David Geffen, Katzenberg set out to build a Hollywood powerhouse. DreamWorks Animation took direct aim at Disney with ambitious projects like The Prince of Egypt and quirky hits like Aardman's Chicken Run. But it was Shrek in 2001 that really changed the game. A blockbuster that not only won the very first Oscar for Best Animated Feature, but also skewered Disney's fairy tale formula with a biting parody. Katzenberg had gone from fueling Disney's golden age to mocking it with the biggest stage in animation. By the time DreamWorks Animation was acquired by NBC Universal in 2016 for $3.8 billion, Katzenberg had proven his point. He wasn't just Disney's former studio head, he was the architect of their fiercest rival. And from The Lion King to Shrek, his fingerprints are all over the modern animation landscape. A defector who reshaped the very industry that he once helped lead. From Oswald the Lucky Rabbit to Jeffrey Katzenberg, Disney's biggest challenges have often come from its own defectors, people from the inside. And if you think about it, the story starts and ends with Universal. Charles Mintz took Oswald to Universal in the 1920s, and decades later, Jeffrey Katzenberg's DreamWorks Animation would square off against Disney with Shrek, which was distributed by Universal. Full circle. And if you want to dive deeper into that Disney versus Universal rivalry, I actually made a whole video on it about a year ago. I'll link it up here and down there in the description. So what do you think? Which Disney defector do you believe had the biggest impact? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And hey, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories on how Disney connects to everything. You can also support this show by checking out our merch or leaving a donation at shop.synergylovescompany.com. And remember, sometimes the most magical Disney experiences happen all around you. You just need to know where to look. So until next time, keep discovering the magic in everything.